Well, I started working in government for Philippine cinema in 1982. And that was the time that Imelda Marcos had this dream of making Manila the Cannes Film Festival of Asia. Okay? And earlier, she put her money where her mouth is. I'm not a Marcos loyalist, folks, no, but let's give it to her because she created the cultural center of the Philippines.
She had access to all the money she wanted.
What you call this? A Philippine School for the Arts, and of course that building now, which looks like a white elephant, but such a beautiful edifice in the Manila Film Center. So when she was doing in the 1980s, the Manila International Film Festival, MIFF. Ang bahay niya, Jerry, was primarily just the PICC. But along with the plans were, her idea of creating an edifice. At ang pattern niya was the Parthenon. Mm-hmm. That's why Froilan Hong, the architect, designed the Manila Film Center to look like it's a, big, imposing, classical Greek thing that sunset would reflect on. So, I started by being an addict with films. So that means in trabaho natin, I don't have money. I just love films. So I would go there. I'd go to the PR, to media office. I'll ask, so, you want me to do anything? You want me to interview people? I can write articles for you. Just give me a pass. And then one day, a friend of mine told me, there's somebody here. I have a friend. I don't know whether I should talk about this, but diretsuhin ko na lang. Sabi ni Ernest Santiago, do you remember Ernest Santiago, the owner of Coco Banana? Naku, eto na yung kwento. He said, Ed, I know you're at the PICC and I know you're going to watch the films now, but this is an emergency because I have a friend and she wants to talk to somebody because she's very depressed and something bad happened to her. Sige. Because by the way, during that time, I was an astrologer and a tarot card reader. Right. So it turns out I said yes, and when I got home, my father was worried because there were PSG people in my house. It turns out the person who was Ernest Santiago's friend was Aimee Marcos. This was January. The January after the December disappearance of her then boyfriend, Tommy Manotoc, who was married to Aurora P1. Yes. But they were so in love, they eloped. He disappeared. Yes. And the theory, the urban legend is this all right? I think it's good for the story. And Aimee cannot say no because it's a fact. And the theory is, pinakidnap ng nanay niya o tatay niya. So what I did actually, Ernest Santiago, I earlier told his astrology and tarot cards and everything I told him came true. Sabi, sige, wala mo yung friend ko. Wala ko si Aimee. While I was reading her cards and astrology, we were talking about films because doon ako galing earlier. And then, I remember one of the things that struck in my reading with her, it lasted for 4 hours. She never paid me a single cent because the Marcoses are like that. They don't give you money. Well, anyway, so, basta sinabi ko sa kanya, yung problema mo masusolve before Valentine's Day of 1982. Tommy Manotoc was released the very first week of February. Flash forward to May. Marcos gave to Aimee the director generalship of this thing called the Experimental Cinema of the Philippines. And she remembered this astrologer who read her fortune in January. And through Boy Noriega, who was the head of the programming of ECP, they got in touch with me. Would you like a job, Iho? Because I was broke. I dropped out of school. And I said, yes. And what will you do? Program world cinema. And of course, I said yes. Wow. So that's how I got into cinema, through astrology and by telling the fortunes of. And that is not a joke. And I've lasted from 82 to 2018.
2000, yeah.
So, kung mahuhula ka, may pag-asa ka. It's a government office, and if I'm going to be frank with you again, to me, it's one of the best efforts of the Philippine government to give Philippine cinema a shot in the arm. Of course, it's a Marcos machinery. Yeah. If you talk about the motives, etc., but ECP was a fabulously designed building. It wasn't Imelda's idea. It was the idea of the people around her. Marita Manuel, sila Adrian Cristobal, all the intelligentsia that worked with the Marcoses. The design of the ECP, Jerry, was fabulous because it had an archives that kung natuloy talaga yung archives, it would have been a football field size archives, the biggest inside the building, which is in the first and second floors. It had a film programming department of where I was. And the film programming, ang job namin was to fill up the theaters with classics from world cinema, Philippine classics, and alternative films. It had a film education department. Ang head nun si Ward Luarca. It had a film fund. Si Manay Ichu was the head. That means if you made a film, kulang ka ng pera, she would give you a counterpart fund to finish it. It had the film ratings board, which was the father of the CEB now. Si Marcos Roses was the head, which means if you made a good film, Jerry, we will give you a tax rebate of so much, etc., etc. You know, no other institution in Southeast Asia was created like that in the 80s. So, unfortunately, when we kicked out the Marcoses, just like most of the good things, it was one of the Marcosian, sabi ni Crepuson nga, institutions that was dismantled. Can I share with you two other cultural things na giniba nila ng Cory administration? I voted for Cory. Well, one was Rolando Tino's Teatro Filipino, which was an amazing theater company.
Rolando.
And he was doing classics of Shakespeare, Durenmat, Sartre, etc. Bertolt Brecht translated into Filipino, and Tony Espeo's Bulwagang Gantimpala. Then you had the Manila Film Center. Lahat to tinibag.
So all of these three that you mentioned were not under the CCP. How did that
the CCP
work?
Ganito yan. When the ECP was independent from the CCP. So, CCP primarily was Imelda's home for the performing arts, dance, theater, music, etc. And the ECP was primarily for film. When the Marcoses left, the new CCP, under Mrs. Rojas and Nick Chongson, decided that bakit puro performing arts? We should also include the non-performing arts, which was the visual arts, film and broadcast, and literature. So when they were kicked out, sinira na yung ECP, I was hired by Hami Soto to work with him in the VLMA, or the Visual Literary Media Arts, which was a new addendum to the organizational structure of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Meron siyang, actually, it was just the museum. Handled by, what's his name? That guy.
The father of conceptual art.
Yes. Si Chabet. And,
Chabet.
Because it was really just the museum, Jerry.
I see.
And it was during the Cory thing, that the Cultural Center of the Philippines acknowledged that arts is not just ballet and music and theater, but also the broadcast arts, film, literature, and the visual arts. When the ECP folded up, it was transformed into the Task Force for Cinema under the Cory administration. Ang head nun was Sirio Santiago. Ang trabaho ni Sirio was just to look at all the assets of the ECP and see what can be, managed, what can be absorbed, but basically, walang nangyayari, The Task Force for Cinema eventually became the Film Development Council of the Philippines. So, ang unang head niya was Bibot, tas naging si Tita Mids, tas si Loris, and then sila Jackie Atienza, and now it's Lisa Dino. So, FDCP is really the great-granddaughter of the experimental cinema of the Philippines, with a smaller budget. It was like a big playground, Jerry. Can you imagine? I'm crazy about movies, and we had this beautiful building which had a main theater that could seat 2,000 people, fabulous site level, sensor round. I think the first big cultural center in Asia that had sensor round. We had 2 mini theaters, but our mini theaters were 450 and 350 seaters and 12 preview rooms.
Wow.
The biggest would hold the workshops of Ricky Lee, Rolando Tino, etc. So for me, a kid then in the early 80s, uso yung punk and all of that shit. I was, it was like heaven to me, And my job was to look at, catalogs from the French embassy, from the British Council, and figuring out what programs to show, the Renoir, the Truffauts, the Kurosawas, the Pressburger films.
Wow, amazing.
I must have done something good in my past life. I would like to believe that Lino and Ishma were both my friends.
Oh.
Yes. I met Lino because one of my dear friends who became my boss in CCP was a dear friend of Lino Brocka, Hani Soto. Hani Soto, Agustin Soto, was one of the original manunuri ng pelikulang Filipino members. And he took a shine to me because even though he was older than me, I was a nerd and I was crazy about films. And whenever we'd talk about movies, etc., etc. And it was through him I met the likes of Doy Del Mundo, Nick Chongson, Pio de Castro, etc., etc., and Lino Brocka. What I cannot forget about Lino was during the time of the ECP, ayaw niyang pumasok sa Manila Film Center. Because remember, he is so vocally anti-Marcos.
Yes.
Okay? And most of his films are indictment of the Marcos regime. And it was only when we moved to the CCP, and Hami was then the boss, that Lino would grace the occasions of the CCP. But then right after, matay siya kagad so that was the year he died. Si Ishma is the same, but Ishma had no bones. He would go to the Manila Film Center. And one of the things I'd like to share with you, Jerry, is that, remember, I'm sure the other interviewers told you, that the only film that made Imelda Marcos cry was Manila by Night. I will not forget that because I was already working at the ECP then.
Okay.
So we were already in the Philippine Plaza. We haven't moved to the Manila Film Center. Marita Manuel and the people behind City After Dark, best friend niya nila Ishma, no? They were nakastambayan sa sa museum near the Central Bank, the Central Bank Museum, where the Met. There was a museum there, the Gold Museum now. But that's where we used to have films. And I remember nung ginawa to ni Ishma, and this was one of the films that Imelda bankrolled to have a new prints, French and Filipino subtitles. I think she identified 25 classics of Philippine cinema. Biyaya ng Lupa, Banta ng Kahapon, Jerry De Leon's films, and so kasama yung Manila by Night.
But she hasn't seen it.
She hasn't seen it. Now, when she saw it, she got so fucking pissed. So she called the people behind it, including Marita Manuel and everybody who helped in the writing, sila Manito De Leon, sila George Season, to a big lunch. And there she says, okay, are you trying to kill me? While crying. So what are you trying to do to my city of the good, the true, and the beautiful? Tamemi sila Mother Lily because she was the producer. So what they did is they cut out, if I'm not mistaken, about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you watch the film, lahat ng may sex, tinanggal, chop, 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 and all mention of Manila was removed from the film. So it was released during the MMFF, I think. It was shown in CCP, then released publicly as City After Dark. But if you watch it in the movie houses, wala kang maintindihan because in the original Manila by Night, there were a lot of sex scenes between all the great actors and actresses. And what's worst is, Jerry, in the last part of the film, they had to shoot a disclaimer. Yung bading na character, naging born again, at naging straight, and tapos yung dating bulag, she became born again. So, they had to create a false ending and pasted it to the film. Now, this is the finest irony. Remember when I was hired by Amy? She and her mother wasn't on good terms, right? Because ang suspecha nga ang you know the story I told you earlier. So I think Amy's biggest revenge was in 1984. We found the original uncut integral copy of Manila by Night. Si Mother Lily told us that she had the uncut version. And Amy, being the loka-loka that she was, she said, let's premiere this at the Manila Film Center. My hair standing. And so years after the Manila Film Festival, where it was shown as City After Dark, we had a premiere of the integral version of Manila by Night.
2 years after.
2 or 3 years. I forgot. Sorry, I'm 65, so I don't remember the exact dates. But it was a bongga premiere. All the stars were there, but it was uncut, and people gave it a standing ovation.
Oh my God. Okay, within the lunch meeting with Mrs. Marcos, was Ishmael there?
Of course, yeah.
And do you remember how he reacted?
Well, I wasn't there. Kinuwento lang sa akin.
Yeah, but so what happened after?
This is the Marcos era. You can't say no. So you have to just say yes to everything. So of course, diba? They just had to cut out all the parts, and the government didn't want to show it. Or actually, ang feeling ko doon is Berlin wanted to show it, but the government wanted to show the City After Dark, sanitized version. And I think Berlin would have no part of that.
Okay.
Because Berlin, basically, of all the film festivals in the world, is the most political. So, syempre, bakit siya magkaka-interest sa pelikula na, pero if I were Berlin, I should have shown it and had a disclaimer na this was a sanitized version. So, it is very funny because at the same time that Ishma was making Manila by Night, he was, I think, commissioned by the government to make a documentary. So, parang, if Manila by Night is fiction, and a lot of the scenes there are, showed you the underbelly of Manila, yung documentary ni Ishma, okay, was exactly the same. It was shot in the same place, but of course he was talking to real prostitutes or construction workers and ordinary people. And the funny part is, the print just surfaced now, and I hope you could get it.
Yeah, this was the one that showed the nice side of Manila. It showed the PICC and the new building.
It was one of those touristy thingies, but it's still made by the same mind. So it would be nice. I have a feeling Ishma kasi, the biggest difference between Lino and Ishma for me in my mind, Lino is so passionate. Okay, he's a people person. He likes, he's a very emotional person. He likes to dish it out to you derecho. While Ishma is the bon vivant. He has a fabulous sense of irony and satire. He can laugh at things and can be very sarcastic. And if he's hurt, he would not show it. Lino, if he's hurt, he would scream at you, "Putang ina mo, ganyan, ganyan." And I remember his biggest fight with Rolando Tino during the time of Burlesque Queen, when they were, I think, basta may away sila, nagmumurahan sila dun sa may booth kung saan nagsiscreening. And to me, even though they were friends, and they had a bit of rivalry, but it was a very creative rivalry. You would not hear Lino bad-mouthing Ishma. You would not hear Ishma bad-mouthing Lino. They knew who they each were and respected each other. But if you notice their films, yung pelikula ni Ishma, they're hilarious. They're tinged with so much irony. All the characters are kitsch, etc. Samantalang si Brocka, all the characters are earnest.
Yeah.
And they're actually very kitschy characters. You see Mona Lisa and Insyang, they're very, a lot of people would like to emulate them in soap operas. Yeah. But you would see that the styles are totally different. And to me, that's it. If you're a director, who you are cannot be taken out from your films. That's why I'm feeling ko nga, Jerry, if marami kang skeletons in the closet, don't make movies. Because people will see who you are, whether you know it or not. And that's the beauty about these two guys. They were unafraid. You have to include with them, is Mike De Leon. And they're my three pillars when it comes to activism in Philippine cinema. Pero ibang-iba din yung style. I mean, it's very sad because, actually I'm supposed to be very happy because now there's so many films going around. A lot of our films make it in the biggest festival, Cannes, Berlin, Busan, Venice, Every year may nananalo tayo. For example, Love Diaz had a year where he won both in Berlin and Venice. But I'll be honest with you, the mid-70s and up to the early 80s was a magical era. If you're crazy about cinema, all of a sudden you had the likes of Lino and Bernal making films like Manila by Night, Insyang, Manila Sukuko ng Liwanag, and then of course the films by Peke, the films by Luis Guillen, the films of Marlu Diaz-Abaya, the films of Mario O'Hara. It was an amazing era because before that it was just junk. It was just bomba films and a lot of genre films. I love genre films. I love horror films. I love vampire movies. But then when Lino, ang sa akin the thing that was the hudyat or the alarm for the change was Lino Brocka's Manila Sukuko ng Mga Liwanag. He wrote this and had Si Mike De Leon as the cinematographer and Doy as the writer, and the team of people who supported him, sila Manito De Leon, were like-minded, intelligent people who just wanted a different type of cinema. And for a young kid like me during that era, wow, this was unheard of. It was a big surprise. The next one that for me cemented the change was Itim by Mike De Leon. And of course, sunod-sunod na. One of my favorite memories was that I remember I saw Manila sa Kuko ng Liwanag in the old Quad Theater when wala pa yung mga malaking... And I remember when I left the movie house, I was walking, I think I was looking for a cab or a jeep, and I was thinking, fuck, pwede pala gumawa ng ganong klaseng pelikula. I saw Itim in the Circle Theater. I was in UP, I snuck out of class, I went there, and I cried. Because I didn't realize that you could be technically excellent in a cinema. You know, Mike De Leon's forte is editing and cinematography. And when I saw it, sabi ko, oh my God. You know, actually, hindi lang sila Jerry. It's not just them. Because I also teach in UP and the main of LaSalle. No? But it's not even just where I teach. I think it's a syndrome now for a lot of young people who grew up in this era that they have very little anchoring with the past. And to me, what is the problem there? The problem there is that I might think I'm doing a very new film, when actually Lino did this 40 years ago, or maybe Ditzi Carolino made a film about kids 20 years ago. For me, what's crucial as a teacher is to be the gift of memory to these kids, because now they're excellent. You know, they can make films, they can watch films in YouTube, they can study films in YouTube. But what they need is, you know, parang the girth or the depth of being immersed in their own cinemas. My advice to my students, if you want to make it to the big festivals, if you want to be a Love Diaz, if you want to be a Brillante, the first thing you do is don't copy Hollywood films, because the last thing festivals want is a copy of Hollywood, of a copy of Hollywood, of a copy of Hollywood. They're looking for films that talk about, in our case, the Filipino experience, which is the reason why the films of Brocka, Bernal, and Mike De Leon, they're still classic. And the ones that make it to the festivals, yung mga bago nating filmmakers who I love, that's what they share with the world. And the gift that you're giving with this project, Jerry, you know, I'm not trying to flatter you, is that you're giving them the gift of memory. So congratulations. Thank you for having me as a part of it. You know, just like most of the kids, I live in YouTube and Facebook. So, see, there was this directors roundtable, and I think the sponsor was the Hollywood Reporter and Antonio Cuaron, who is my idol now because he made this fabulous film which I saw in Busan, Roma. Okay, and he was with Spike Lee and other directors. He was the guy who was facilitating the roundtable discussion with these directors. Asked, so which of your films have a message or have a political meaning? And Cuaron just nailed it. Sabi niya, whether you intend it or not, your film will have a message. People who see it, since it's a work of media, will see something in it, will glean something from it that maybe you didn't even intend. Or you may have intended it this way, and some people it will resonate, but to other people they will get something else. But that to me is the beauty of cinema, and that to me is the beauty of having excellent minds like Brocka and Bernal when they make films, because the synergy happens when you watch it. Biglang, uy, may sinabi siya tungkol sa LGBT. Uy, may sinabi siya tungkol sa women, etc. That maybe he wasn't even aware of. So I have a feeling that all stories, all films, even Beauty and the Beast, would have a political significance. That's my stand.
But Brocka's and Bernal's movies, Maynila, for example, and Insyam, and Jaguar, and Ora Pro Nobis,
and Bona, and lahat sila.
His 5 films, and then Bernal's Manila by Night, were actually banned by the government for public, viewing.
Well, part of me is saying the repression that we had during the Marcos era was fuel for the creativity of these people. I just noticed that after EDSA, diba? Anong box office is Pidodida. Give me a fucking break. So sorry. You know what I mean? After years of Ganito Kami Noon, after years of Oro Plata Mata, etc., etc., nung wala na tayong kaaway, nung napatalsik na yung diktador, di ba? Mga Tito Vic and Joey films. So, Filipinos seem to work best when they're pushed to the against the wall. Even though I don't think it's a very nice situation. Because, di ba, you can only do that so much. Pero, yun na nga, Jerry, when I talk to young people, and a lot of them are really activists also, and I'm really happy. But the nice thing about young people now is they're not the types who would go out in the streets and wave red flags. They would like to use the medium as their way of just getting their ideas across. And the nice thing about these young kids I've met, most of them students who become filmmakers, who join Cinemalaya, meron silang pet passion eh. Some to them is the trans experience, as specific as that. Some to them is poverty or children, etc., etc. And that's a nice thing. Now we will never lack for filmmakers who put, the social realities and the creativity of filmmaking together.
Bernal was I think the first Filipino director who was schooled in film school
in Pune.
In Pune.
So but the reals, because I went to Pune, but I didn't study there. I stayed there for 3 months doing a documentary on the school, and it turns out he didn't finish the course. So he's the first Filipino who went there, and they loved him, and it's a fabulous. Can you imagine? It's in Pune, which is like the Baguio of India. Okay, malamig and beautiful old trees, and you're in this huge complex with buildings surrounded by Asian, African, and puro Asian filmmakers, and most of them are grantees ng mga gobyerno nila, and everything you do is imbibe film. And he was there, and I think he was one of the lodestars for his batch. He had to go home because I think somebody from his family passed away. So hindi niya natapos yung last term.
So but Brocka is not really schooled, although he has a background in theater.
Theater made him.
Works in PETA.
And if you looked at his films, Jerry, di ba? These films are Greek tragedies.
Yes.
And his best films, his most political film for me is not Laban ang Bayan Ko. It's not Ora Pro Nobis. It's Insyang. Why? Because not a single word of rallies or anything, but it talks about how poverty, eats up the soul of young people.
Yeah,
and to me, that's more subversive. In the same way, now, if you ask me what is the most political film, Ed, I would say Bicycle Thief. And not a single rally or anything. It's all about just an ordinary family and the effects of dehumanization brought about by poverty that's happening. And to me, para sa akin, that's the essential Lino. Well, ganito yan, Jerry. Kasi one of the best things about the ECP, it was a very holistic film arm. And one of the biggest appendages was the film archives of the experimental cinema in the Philippines. Nung nawala yung ECP, minana siya ng experimental cinema of the Philippines. Okay? Yung parang, minana siya ng Cultural Center of the Philippines. But if this was the budget of the ECP, right after EDSA, this was the budget of the CCP Coordinating Center for Film. And one of the thrusts of Hammy that he wanted to preserve from the ECP was the archives.
Okay.
And archives is expensive.
And
we have an archives at the CCP, but it's not as glorious as, let's say, the Pune archives or the archives of Australia or the archives of other countries. When you talk about Philippine archiving, it's one of the most redolent horror stories in world cinema. Can I give you one of my favorite horror stories about archiving? So this was already 1999 or 2000. While looking at the newspapers, I was still working with at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. My boss then was Mita Rufino and Gloria Angara. While looking at the newspapers, we saw a notice to the public. Remember, sa dyaryo, people used to read newspapers then. So, notice to public. Nakalagay doon, notice to public. They're auctioning out chairs, office chairs, computers, mouses, mouse pads, etc., etc. And for negatives.
I think I read that.
that was from the government. That was from the task force of the Philippines.
Yeah.
And they were auctioning everything that the experimental cinema and the Manila Film Center owned. What was worst was that they included the negatives of 4 Filipino classics: Peque's Oro Plata Mata, Ishmas Himala, Pio de Castro's Soltero, and Abo de la Cruz Misterio sa Tuwa, where I appeared. They were auctioning the negatives. And the moment we saw that, the first thing, I went to my boss, sabi ko, we have to stop this. So Mita Rufino, God bless her, no? She said, okay, let's stop this. Kinausap niya yung ano. So let's hold this. Nagpa-TRO kami. No, ABS was already bidding.
Okay.
But it came to a point when the ABS Archives was telling the CCP, if you don't release the print because we're going to pay for it, didinamanda namin ang Cultural Center of the Philippines. It took about a month for us to negotiate. And finally, we sat down with them, with the archives. Sige, we'll release the prints to you and you just pay it. But the thing is, ang usapang matino is, we use these films for the Film Appreciation Workshop of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. We show Oro Plata Mata, Himala, all over the country. So people will see in 35mm, parang Cinema Paradiso. And ABS said, sige, we'll do that. Okay, I don't care if my friends from ABS gets mad. After 2 months, some kid comes to us and says, Sir Ed, we were trying to watch Oro Plata Mata from ABS, but they're charging us so many thousands. So that for me is stupid. For me, that's the problem with the Philippines. Other countries, they will go around the world, for example, France, and look for an old Renoir or Truffaut or Agnes Barda. When they find it, they will pay a lot of money just to get it back to their country. Tayo mismo nagbibenta ng classics natin. I mean, that's just one of the horror stories of archiving. Si Lino naman, of course, di ba, hate siya ni Marcos. So, he entrusted his prints, his negatives, to his best friend then, Pierre Richant. Pierre Richant is one of the big shots of the Cannes Festival. He just passed away a couple of years. But when Lino died suddenly, nagka-problema. Sino ang may-ari ng rights ng mga pelikula ni Lino? And all of them, most of them, were with Pierre Richant in Paris. Okay, so I remember there was a time we were trying to get it back, and he was so hard to talk to because ang sungit-sungit niya, and wala rin pera ang gobyerno. And we were just lucky that some of the prints na restore ng BFI, for example, in Xi'an made a fabulous restoration, and I think Korea also did that. But that's a problem. Even our great directors, may not have access to their own films, and with us along. I mean, the Filipino generations, that comes up. Let's put it this way: archiving was not up front in the Pinoy consciousness. It's only now that we have Netflix and the search for content. Everybody's trying to look for old films. Turner TV, etc. But during that time, in the 80s and the mid-80s and even the early mid-90s, pag gumawa ka ng pelikula, nasa garahe mo na lang yan. Wala ka ng So what CCP did, I remember Marcos came out with a rule that every film that is made, the producer should donate a print to the archives that was at the ECP. When they got kicked out, that rule was rescinded. And I remember, nung early years of the CCP, sila, the Sampaguita Pictures were with us, the Leia Productions were with us, the Amalia Fuentes Pictures were with us. It was only FPJ who had the foresight and the vision to realize na, his old films, pwede ko palang ilagay sa Umatic, para ipalabas sa GMA. And then when that became prevalent, na
FPJ to GMA,
there's cash in your trash, they started getting it back. Sampaguita pulled out everything from us, even though we paid so much money for restoring, for maintaining it. So, too late, the hero lagi yung Pinoy. Alam mo, what happens is, one of my biggest advice to young people is, if you study film, you don't have to be a director. You could be a film archivist. And a film archivist, Jerry, it's like being Indiana Jones. Your job is to go around the world to look for the prints of old films, because most of our films were so good that other countries would get copies. Or even, siguro, they struck copies out of it. I'll give you an example. A Jerry De Leon film. Jerry De Leon, one of our national artists for cinema. One of my favorite films from him is this horror film, Kulay Dugo ng Gabi, which I saw as a kid in Center Theater in Quiapo, Quezon Avenue. Guess what? Nawala yan. Walang kopya. Until somebody saw a copy of it in a VHS store in somewhere in the States. And it was a beautifully preserved copy. The problem is, pero maayos pa rin, even the colors are okay. The problem is, the audio, the Pinoy audio, wala na. What exists is the dubbed version. And the guys who produced this was Eddie Romero, another national artist, best friend niya ni Jerry De Leon. I think yung maid niya yung nag-dub nung Kulay Dugo ng Gabi. So, you want to be a vampire. So, ganun yung accent. So, instead of it being horror, it's funny. But when I found a copy, we showed it at the Manila Film Center, at the CCP, and people loved it. But of course, hindi na siya horror, gaging comedy na.
That was during the Film Center was still around.
After
CCP.
na. When in the year 2000, Mita Rufino said, Ed, would you like to look at if we can still rehabilitate the Manila Film Center? And we realized we can't afford it, but we could have outdoor screenings. You remember that?
Yes.
The screenings by the bay. Then we would have bands, we would have poetry reading, and overnight horror films. And then we would have red horrors and people selling barbecues.
I think it went once.
Ang saya-saya, hindi ba? And we weren't charging. We just wanted to do this for the love of.
For the longest time, you were bringing movies all around the country.
That's my reason for being.
That was your second job in the CCP.
It was my main job. When I joined Hami Soto at the Cultural Center of the Philippines, we were showing films on a regular 24/7 basis. The Dream Theater, the Tanghalang Magkonde. But then we had the opportunity through the CCP outreach to show films in the provinces. And one of the first outreach we held was when, in the year 1998, we were invited to, would you believe, Marawi, Butuan, and 6 other sites in the Silay, in Bacolod. Yeah, Olive Hofilenia was our host then. We brought the classic films, Jerry, and we brought them not in Betamax or VHS. We brought them in 35mm. We rented a projector from a private company we would spend about 20,000 a day for the projector with a guy who may bantay, and we would carry these 20 kilos, cans all over the Philippines.
Yeah.
But my realization is, it was such a thrill because you would show Oro Plata Mata in Libagon Leyte in the public square, and people would stand up and applaud and cry. Biyaya ng Lupa and all of that.
Did they like it?
Oh, they loved it. But that's where I realized that Filipinos everywhere are crazy about films.
Did they show any of the Brockas and the Bernal?
Yes, wait. Yung Bernal, ang pinapalabas namin usually were, Himala. Okay. Because that was one of our better copies. We tried to show Manila by Night, but usually nahihirapan kami kasi even though the CCP has no censorship, it's really too bold. I remember we showed Oro Plata Mata in a public plaza. Nilapitan kami ng mga barangay. Sabi, why are you showing us Mitch Valdez and Ronnie Lazaro's genitals, etc., etc. And then I'm from the CCP po. This is our gift to the people. Tala, order tayo ng tuba. And they would enjoy the film. Because you're not showing this to show them sex in the cinema. You're showing them because cinema is life. My favorite Brocka, as I mentioned earlier, is in Siam. Well, primarily because it's the most subversive film. Because the subversion there is told through the drama between mother and daughter living in the slum area. And I remember Brocka, when he was interviewed during this era, he said publicly that ang thema ng in Siam is the poor eats its children. Poverty eats the hopes and dreams of young Filipinos who grow up in it because they cannot fly. And to me, napaka-powerful ng message. And up to now, when I show it in my classroom, everybody is just stunned. At the way it's told, very very tight, very small, and at the same time the performances of Mona Lisa and Hilda Coronel. Yeah, it's an amazing. It's also a pito-pito film. My second would be Manila sa Kuko ng Liwanag, primarily because the first is always one of the best. And as I mentioned, when I saw it, parang it just nayanig ako. I realized that this Filipinos are capable of coming out with highly nuanced, technically proficient, very pithy story. My third Brocka, oh my God, ang dami eh. But if I'm going to, tatlo, dalawa, isa.
So you're going for the early ones?
Yes, the early ones. I'll be honest with you. Even though Ora Pro Nobis and Bayanko were some of his more successful films, I really don't like them compared to the early films because masyado siyang pula. You know what I mean? Rallies and talking about the calf goose. Well, for me the most subversive films are the ones that talk about the day-to-dayness of our ordinary lives.
And Bernal.
Oh, Bernal, of course, Manila by Night. When I teach Bernal, I'm teaching philosophy and film next term, and I'm teaching Manila by Night along with Jean-Paul Sartre, because Sartre talks about people as hell, and I think magandang gamitin yung pelikula ni Ishma when it comes to discussing that. Himala, of course, because again of the irony of the Philippines. It's such a religious country, but at the same time, it's a religion a sham. And of course, it stars Nora Honor at the height of her beauty. And if I had the third, it's one of his. It's not Relacion. It's not Broken Marriage. Would you believe it's Separada? Only because of Rita Gomez. It stars Sandy Ondolong. If I'm not mistaken, there was another girl. Was it? Not Rio Luxin. The girl. Was it Rio Luxin or the girl from Brutal? Ami Austria. And then of course Jay Alagan and yung anak ni Gloria Sevilla. Well, anyway, there's a scene where they're having lunch or so. Sandy Ondolong and maybe sabihin mo na si Ami Austria and then Rita Gomez. Rita is the old one, Pok. And the two girls are saying, so, ikaw, Sandy, ilang taon ka na? Oh, I'm 16. Ay, ikaw naman, how old are you? I'm 19. Tapos pagtingin nila kay Rita Gomez, I'm hungry. I fell off the chair. I mean, only Bernal can come out with such panache, make films with such panache and such nuance, and at the same time, at the same time, it's very political, but it talks about when you're old, as a woman, parang, di ba, you're discarded. So those three films. Well, my two, my mainstays when it comes to Ishma and Lino is Insyang and Manila by Night. I love Insyang, exposing it to my students primarily because I use it as my acting in cinema. Film. Because if you know, Lino is an actor's director. That's what he's known. Aside from being the political, the pulang-pulang director, he's known as the actor's director. In fact, before he does a major scene, he acts it out. And then his brother, the family the estate of Brocka donated most of his scripts to the Cultural Center of the Philippines, and I would spend afternoons just looking at his old scripts, old pictures. Ang dami niyang litrato doon na bago gawin ni Nora Honor or ni Ami Austria or whoever yung artista niya yung eksena, he would be in that place and act it out and just to show them, of course. And I love showing that primarily because it's such a tight, again, sa script writing also, it's a very tight way of telling a story. So that film plus Kisap Mata are my favorite films when talking about the story as a tight unit, because you can have Oro Plata Mata, which is like Bertolucci's Novecento, which is huge, but you can have small bits of drama that are more intense. Yung Manila by Night, para sa akin, it's the idea of many characters. It's the opposite of Insyang. Many storylines, fugues happening with different characters. But to me, primarily, it's just the story of a city. And when I did my research for the Asian Public Intellectuals grant in 2007 and 2008, my original title was Changing Cinemas, Changing Lives, the City in Southeast Asian Cinema. Because I really feel that, kids nowadays, when they make a film, they don't know it. They're documenting a certain setting, a time and place with their film. So whether their film is sci-fi or very natural, when you see their films, you're transported. Or you begin to realize, oh my God, this is how Manila was. I think yung mga pelikula ni Ishma at ni Lino, what makes them powerful is they're so immersed in the setting. And the setting is the Filipino experience. And primarily the setting is the city experience.
The urban experience.
The urban experience. I thought you were going to ask me, if Lino and Bernie would be here, would we be in the fucking mess we'd be in? Where my feeling is, the experience of the city is always dynamic. If I look at the city I grew up in the early 60s and 70s, that Manila is not the same Manila as now. And neither would I want that Manila to be the same Manila as now. Because people nowadays, especially the young people, are a totally different creature. They have many skills, like instant curatorship because of mass media, etc., etc. Samantalang when I was growing up, I'd like to believe we were more innocent and more tactile. If you wanted to go out drinking, I'd go to your house and bring beer with you, or we go out. Now we can just Facebook and just stare at each other on the phone. So the city then was just right for our mindset. The city now, it's another universe altogether. And I guess I think for me, one of the best ways to approach it would not to hit it in all its colors, but to see bits and pieces of it. And to me, that's the value of the filmmaker. When you watch a film by, what's his name, Brillante Mendoza, now you only see, this is how he sees the city. When you watch a Love Diaz film, even though most of them are set in some fantastical place or the regions, you see he does this. When you watch the film of Gerald Tarog, etc., etc. So again, you're given all of these facets. They represent pathways or portals to that era. So their films are not just documents of that period, but they're actually pathways. Because when you're watching it, you're there, Jerry. Well, let's put it this way. My biggest problem is during the time of Lino and Bernie, when people got mad, we went to the streets. Now, when people get mad, they scream in Facebook and then they put a selfie or a picture of their food. We get distracted. It's not that Filipinos now ay walang bayag or wala ng political feeling. It's just that we allow our ability to just be passive observers to take over that dynamic aspect of us, which during that time we had to be, because we didn't have cell phones. So if I wanted to go out and party and have sex, I'd just go out and not stay at home. Let's put it this way. If they didn't say anything, they would have died. I think it's in their DNA as human beings. But it turns out they're human being filmmakers. That when they say something, they want other people to listen. And not just listen, but use it as a jumping point for transformation. You cannot tell a Brocka or Bernal to shut up. And even if you did, they will not fucking shut up. And that's the beauty of these two people, that their films continue to tell us. Yeah. You cannot affect people if your movie is shite. If your movie is shite, you will not affect anybody.
That's true. That's true.
So para sa akin nga, I think they just set out to tell a story.
Yeah.
And their politics and their cinematic style is just a part of it. But I think yung pinaka-biggest impetus nila was just tell a story. Well, Brocka's biggest contribution was the idea that Filipinos was giving us the idea that as an artist, and a filmmaker as an artist, is never a silent witness. It's never just a bystander. We are a part of the woof and warp of our society, which means that if we want to change things, it has to start with us. And I think that's a beauty that we get. Because dati pag sinabi mong artist, gusto ko lang ng mga mayayaman o ng mga politiko, etc., etc. But being an artist, you are, really marinated in your experience, and that everything you do affects generations. I think that's his biggest gift, at least to me, as a human being, as a filmmaker. Well, si Bernie, ibang-iba naman si Bernie. I love Bernie's sense of irony. I love Bernie's sense of distance. If Brocka is in the middle of the action, fighting with tooth and claw with the oppressors, si Bernie is on he's in the bleachers, but he's commenting always. It's the power of the mind to put together all of these things, that side, and at the same time laugh about it. Si Ishmael Bernal has a fantastic sense of irony, and it proves to you that Filipinos, the best Filipino films should be that. Problema ngayon guys, most of our Filipino films, walang sense of irony, masyadong seryoso.
That's earnest.
So earnest.
Yeah.
Parang, give me a break.
Maybe the irony is not gone in this generation.
And I don't know, Jerry. That's our job as educators, dude.
I know what you mean. There's no sense of irony.
We have to, shake them up. But I'd like to believe that young Filipinos are not dumb.
Yeah.
They're just vessels, just waiting. Just waiting. And our job as professors, or maybe teachers, or mentors, or whatever, is just to give them dollops of what we enjoyed when we were young. I will never forget Lino is always wearing his black leather jacket. But one of his best friends was my boss, si Hami Soto. And Lino, he's not, he's very just an ordinary person. He doesn't see himself as an idol, as Lino Brocka. He was just Lino, very, very vocal, etc. And Ishma loves to drink and loves to bitch, and ang saya-saya. Not all the National Artist Awards make me happy. In fact, there was a time na I was talking to kasi the CCP and the NCC are the ones who manage the awards, even though it's a big collegial thing. There was a time na I really felt, Jerry, that itigil na tong putang ina awards na to. That was the year that, a certain person won. There were two certain people who won in a very shady way. There was one there who won for music, and he deserved it. And because of his association with the other two, parang na-depress siya.
Yeah.
I really felt that was the height of using, yun ang problema ng Pilipino. If this is art and this is politics, politicians love to use art. Okay? And it's up to now. Patronage politics is still there. And to me, that was the height of patronage politics. But when Lino and Ishma won, that to me was serendipity. Parang, this is an award that means something. You didn't have to sell anybody the idea that Lino and Ishma deserved it. I think they were born to get it. One of my wishes would be for Mike De Leon to get it, primarily. But he himself hates the awards because ang nanay niya is Imelda. The same as people through the broadcasts. But Lino's was the one that was shocking because it was a tabloid death. Coming from a bar and being with his, I think, partner pa niya nun. And then, of course, the chismis na what was happening just before, and that nag-aaway daw sila. All of the typical tabloid urban legends. But what a way to go, at the height, of his creativity.
Yeah.
And then, yung kay Ishma naman was as depressing because he was he abroad or something. Basta, ang kwento lang sa akin is kumakain siya ng maraming chicharon. And then the next day, parang, that's it. Natigok siya. But in the last part of Ishma's life, he became a bit reclusive. He had a bar in Maginhawa, which was the home. It was like Penguin for Maginhawa, where a lot of people from theater, from the visual arts would go and have their last beers before going home, etc., etc. And but the last part of his life, parang he pulled back. But I don't know. I wish they would still be here. I wish they survived their deaths, because I think young people nowadays, I don't think they would compromise. I don't think they would put up with the shit that we've been putting up with our government. I think, you know, they would be the lodestars for young film students na may bayag ka pag gumagawa ka ng film. Well, primarily is to watch their films first. And then to watch their films not like film students, but the way we watched it, as fans. Because by just blind watching, no expectations that you will be given a quiz or write a paper about it, you can just lose yourself in the magic that they created. And my feeling kasi is, Jerry, once you expose yourself to the best, you are never the same.